Hi, thank you so much for coming today. My name is Hannah Bastian. I'm our museum educator for studio programs and special projects here at the JSMA. And I co-facilitate Reflections and Connections with Rosemary Oakman right here. She is our graduate employee, and her title is our Arts and Healthcare Program Coordinator. So today we're going to share with you a little more information about our Reflections and Connections program. We are going to include the history of these programs in the US, the methodologies that we use here in our program, and some of the outcomes of our program. And before we get started, I wanted to share a little overview about Reflections and Connections. It is a series of 6 free workshops, and this is for individuals living with young onset or early to mid-stage dementia and their care partners. The program takes place once a week over a series of 6 weeks. Each session is 2 hours. That includes 1 hour upstairs in the gallery in conversation, and then 1 hour downstairs in the art studio creating art. So the aim of the program is to create a positive and creative experience for everyone. That includes people with dementia and their care partners. And additionally, the program serves as a platform for social engagement between people with similar experiences. So our program is in collaboration with the Alzheimer's Association. And before we share more information about the program itself, I would like to welcome Abby Gershenson. And she's going to come up here to tell us a little bit more about some of the basics of Alzheimer's disease. So Abby will speak a little bit, and then Rosemary Oakman will go over a little more information about our program. After that, we'll have a short account from one of our participants, and then we'll do a little walkthrough out in the gallery. So here's Abby.
I'm going to do this because I'm a little more comfortable moving around. Hi, everybody, and welcome, and it's good to see some familiar faces. I'm Abby. Thank you for the introduction. And I'm just going to launch in here to a very mini version, kind of, if you could, we have 15 different classes that are each an hour and a half long. So what I'm gonna try and do is sort of 15 minutes about some of the basics of Alzheimer's disease and dementias. What are the difference? What are the risk factors? What are the signs? A little bit about the brain, and then we're gonna segue into Rosemary, who's gonna talk about the program and why this is a special program for people who have a dementia, and how is it that art can be part of this? Okay, so first slide here is, this is where I get to try and do a knee bend here. So I'm aging, my body is aging, right? It's not as easy for me to physically do the things I used to be able to do. Same thing is happening to my brain. My brain is not nearly as agile as it used to be. So we have this term we call natural aging, typical age-related changes, right? So what you're seeing on the slide are some of the things that may happen to us as we age, because I can't do those knee bends as well either, and my brain isn't as agile. So oftentimes people say, well, if I was doing something and I needed a pair of scissors, and then you can tell me how many times has this happened to you. I walked into the room where the scissors are. I got to the room. I looked around. Why am I here? Why did I come here? So I hear people laughing. You can agree that that happens to more than me. So then I go back to what I'm doing, right? And I realize, oh, I needed the scissors. Okay, so this is included up here with the typical changes in age-related typical changes. Okay, so now what Joyce says, and I'm not going to play it, is what happened to her was that she had trouble counting out change. She had trouble spelling of and the. She was having minor car accidents. She was falling. So she's the example of somebody who had something that's not typical age-related changes, okay? So when we talk about dementias, and Alzheimer's disease is one of them, we're talking about a disease. We're talking about a condition that is not simply something that, oh, it's just normal aging. Okay, so The next slide is a little bit, and I know you can't see number 10, but there's 10 different signs. We have on the table there, Alzheimer's Association has lots of great materials, so I've put one on the table that's called Know the 10 Signs, and feel free to go look at that. But what I wanted to say about, with Alzheimer's disease or another dementia, what's happening, unlike typical age-related changes, it's not once in a while. It's changes that are consistent. These are ongoing patterns that I'm losing my cognitive function. My brain just isn't working as well on an ongoing basis. I can't rely on it like I used to. And this is where, if we see this, that's when it's time to get a physician involved. So I'm not going to go over the checklist now because this is the thumbnail sketch, but two things that I wanted to mention. On number 1, it says memory changes that disrupt daily life. So disrupt daily life is a key as far as if I'm trying to figure out, is this normal aging, is this not normal aging? So for an example, if I wake up and I know I've got that doctor's appointment on Tuesday and I'm thinking, okay, well, it's Monday. I go out and I walk the dog. I come back and I make breakfast. I putter in the garden. I get a call from the doctor's office. You missed your appointment. Okay, so I never figured out that it was Tuesday. That is what we'd consider that's disrupting my daily life, okay? If, on the other hand, I wake up, oh, it's Monday, and then, you know, before I miss that doctor's appointment, I figured out what day it is, can say that's normal aging, okay? So these are just sort of broad strokes. The other broad stroke is on number 3, familiar tasks. If I used to be an accountant and now I'm doing taxes and I'm just shuffling papers from pile to pile to pile and I cannot figure it out. I used to be able to do this really well and I can't do it anymore. So that's another thing to look at. The last thing I wanted to say about this slide, and this is what I want you to be able to take home, and Rosemary sent me a fabulous mini video on this, but it's a disease of the brain that we're talking about. So the majority of dementias are Alzheimer's disease, and we'll get to that. But if I have Alzheimer's disease, most often it starts in the hippocampus of my brain. And if in the hippocampus of my brain is my center for new learning, new memories. So often we call it short-term memory. So if I'm at the beginning of Alzheimer's disease, I am definitely, this is one of the things that people know is a sign, right? What did I have for breakfast? I can't remember. What did I do yesterday? I can't remember. So the changes in my brain are reflected in things that I'm saying and doing. And what I wanted to try to give everybody the idea about is what you're seeing are symptoms of a disease. So there are changes happening in my hippocampus. That's where my short-term memory is. The other thing that's in this part that's usually right at the beginning with Alzheimer's disease is my language center. So I'm looking for that word. Can you go to the, what's it called, out there? Right, so my language center is going to be affected first as well if it's Alzheimer's disease. And the last thing is, well, let's see, it's up there on visual, on number 5, visual images and spatial relationships. So visuospatial relationships. So my ability to be driving and to say, that curb is pretty far away and I'm okay to turn a little bit more. I may not be aware of how much that distance is between myself and the curb. So those are the things that with Alzheimer's disease might be first. But what I'm trying to say is that this is a disease of the brain, and after, if it's Alzheimer's disease, after it is in that hippocampus part of our brain, it's going to move on, and other parts of other brain cells are going to be damaged and then destroyed. Okay, so I promise we get more upbeat. I'm the downbeat part of the presentation. So dementia, what is dementia? This is actually a definition, because so many people say, well, doctor said that she had dementia, my mom had dementia, but not Alzheimer's disease. So dementia is what we consider the umbrella term. So the definition is, it's some kind of disease of the brain that's causing a loss of my cognitive abilities. It's a very, very broad definition, and there are many, many different types of dementia. So we talked about loss of short-term memory, ability to use language, but every one of these things gets affected if somebody has a dementia. So basically everything that the brain does for us. Okay. So I just wanted to mention really briefly, some people say, why should I go to the doctor? Why should I get that diagnosis? We don't have a cure for this disease. That's sadly true. What we do know, however, is there can be other things that this disease, that could be causing confusion, that could be causing disorientation, and we want to make sure that if it's any one of those, they might be reversible, or they might be life-threatening. So some of the common ones on this slide, and I know if you saw emotional disorders, it's down here twice, you probably passed the test and you don't have to worry about your brain. Something like depression can be causing disorientation. So a thyroid problem is a common one that some people get as they're older, and that can also mimic what we think of as the symptoms of Alzheimer's or dementia. The other one I wanted to mention that's really important is medication interactions or side effects. That's one that we don't always think of. And it can be that maybe I go off that new medication and then I'm doing okay. So, moving on, this is the slide that I've been waiting for. This shows you, that's the umbrella. Dementia is the umbrella term, right? Cognitive changes in my brain. So before I go into Alzheimer's disease, I'll just say that Alzheimer's disease is the lion's share of dementias. 60 to 80% of all dementias that are diagnosed today are Alzheimer's disease. We should call it Alzheimer's dementia, right? Because it is a dementia. So vascular dementia is where blood going to my brain is stopped. So some part of my brain is not receiving enough blood, brain cells die. Usually that's caused by either a stroke or transient ischemic attacks, those TIAs as they call them. I can be having mini strokes while I sleep, and that's what causes vascular dementia, and that can be completely different as far as the symptoms we see, because where is the part of the brain where the blood's being stopped to, right? What are those parts of the brain that are no longer working? It's not predictable like, okay, Alzheimer's disease starts in the hippocampus. Does that make sense? Okay. Then mixed dementia is usually Alzheimer's disease plus vascular dementia, and doctors are starting to realize that diagnosing dementia, or for a long time have been realizing, we have a doctor in the back, diagnosing dementia is complicated, very complicated, and there are many different types of dementias. The other most common that you will see, and there are many people in our community, don't want to embarrass anybody, and there may be more doctors in the house, so forgive me. Dementia with Lewy bodies. The Lewy body is a type of protein that's in the brain that is causing the problems with the communication in the brain. And most commonly, somebody may be coming first for falling, for gait problems, as opposed to no short-term memory. People may have more vivid hallucinations with this type of dementia. So there are very different symptoms. And then I call it frontotemporal dementia. But up here, it's frontotemporal lobar degeneration, FTD. You may have seen it written out. That is a type of dementia that usually starts in this part of the brain. Some people may have inability to speak very well. There's a whole other class of this where some people may lose their empathy for loved ones, and they may make rude, antisocial comments in front of lots of people. So this is the basic of the sort of the most common dementias. There are about 10 to 12 others, and I'm going to skip over that, okay? I'm going to move on from here, though, but the main thing is just to know that we're going to focus in on Alzheimer's disease right now. This is 60 to 80% of these diseases, of dementias. So, excuse me for just a minute. Need my other hand here. Okay. So we already talked about that this is a disease of the brain. We know that progressive, what that means is that once it starts, it keeps on moving, okay? It's the most common form of dementia. We talked about that. As of today, as I stand here today, it does not have a cure. We have no way of delaying the onset. We have no way of slowing it down. So that's the really hard part to hear. And as of today, if you ask a doctor when you get diagnosed, when somebody gets diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease, what's the prognosis? How long does my loved one have to live? They will probably say something like 4 to 15 years. It might even be 4 to 20. It really depends on if there are other medical conditions, because our brains are incredibly resilient. So today, this slide is a little old. We're up to 5.8 million Americans today who have Alzheimer's disease. So this is the hard thing to hear. However, what we do have today is we know there's, as you know, lots and lots of research going on. One of the things we know is that there are medical treatments that can help. There's medication that can help temporarily with this disease, and there are lots of things that we can do to help quality of life. I just wanted to show you this so you're picturing, because we're talking about the brain. I like the picture. So we start, these are neurons or brain cells, and we start life with about 100 billion of these. And then the connections that you see there, they look like tree roots or tree branches. We have about 100 trillion of those. So 100 billion brain cells, about 100 trillion connections, or synapses is what we call them. And what the medication does, so every time, sorry, let me just backtrack. Every time that a signal goes from one brain cell to another, it's an electrochemical signal that passes down one of those synapses. That's a piece of a thought, a piece of a memory, a piece of a behavior. These are the building blocks of how we live, everything we do. So what the medications that we have today, what they will do is that they will help that piece, that little electrochemical signal, be able to travel more completely down that synapse, because what's happening, you've heard people talk about plaques and tangles, right? So these plaques are proteins that are getting in the way of that thing traveling down that synapse, the electrochemical signal. So sorry if I'm getting in too deep, but I just wanted to give you a sense of how these are these proteins in our brain. The plaques are in between the brain cells, the tangles are inside the brain cells. This is really what scientists have been looking at, and then there are other proteins and other things and other types of dementia. Okay, so just wanted to say, let's see, am I getting out of time? Okay, I'm looking at that clock, so I'm trying to keep track. Okay, so currently, okay, this slide looks weird here, but this is the last sort of brass tacks thing I wanted to talk about, which is, because this is what you're probably all thinking right now, oh my God, this is horrible, what are the risk factors? Do I have to worry about this for myself? So what I wanted to talk about is some of the risk factors, and like I said, I apologize, this slide isn't showing up very well, but what do you think the biggest risk factor is for Alzheimer's disease? Does anybody want to wager a guess? Be brave. Yes, okay, thank you. It says it right there. So too many birthdays is what I sometimes say, but that's not something we can do anything about. Right? So age is the biggest risk factor. So somebody at the age of 65, it's about 1 in 9 people that have a dementia. At the age of 85, it's about 1 in 3 people. Nothing we can do about that. Another risk factor, and I don't see it up there, is a head injury, traumatic brain injury, right? Right now, there's a game going on at Autzen Stadium, right? I don't want to put anyone down at all, but we just know that repeated concussions, repeated loss of consciousness, blows to the head. Our military also has a lot of that because of these concussion blasts now that are going on. Those are definitely a risk factor. Another risk factor, and again, maybe I can do something about that, but maybe not, right? If I'm a veteran, it's already, things have happened. Another risk factor that you can see up here, women are two-thirds of the people who have dementias are women. We still don't know why. It says up there because we live longer, but that is now in question. There's a big question mark over that. There's a lot of studies saying, let's look at the hormones and the differences. Let's look at the biology and the chemistry and the differences in that. So That's another risk factor that we can't do anything about. Genetics is another risk factor that we can't do anything about. They say about 25% of people who have a dementia today, it's because it's an inherited in their genes. So the last thing that I wanted to say, though, is that the category that we can do something about is heart health equals brain health. So we've been hearing this for years. What we know today is that every time my heart beats, about 25% of the blood it pumps out goes right up here. This is the biggest vascular system in my body. So if I have heart disease, if I have high blood pressure, if I have diabetes, if I have, they're even saying high cholesterol today on that one, but anything that inhibits that this blood can be dispersed as best as possible in my whole brain is being considered a risk factor at this point. So if we can have good heart health, that's the only thing on this list that we can actually do something about. And that's a whole other talk, because that's lifestyle. But the research, there's definitely a lot of research there, and one of the biggest studies right now going on is one that the Alzheimer's Association is paying for that's involving lifestyle changes. Okay. Whoop. Now I'm going to switch over. So while Rosemary is switching, I just wanted to say we're going to switch over into art now. And I'm going to stick around, so if you have questions, please, or just want to talk about something, I'll be here. What is really important to know, I've already stressed this is a brain disease, because I keep stressing this because there's such a stigma around having this disease, around saying, I have a dementia or I have Alzheimer's disease. Some people like to call it memory loss, because that's less of a stigma. Part of our job as the Alzheimer's Association is to try to get information out so that stigma does not stop people from getting the care they need and getting the support they need. So if I have a symptom, for example, I keep repeating, what time is it? What time is it? What time is it? That might be because I really can't remember, because my short-term memory, which is right here, those brain cells are damaged and destroyed. So it's helpful to try and think of these behaviors as symptoms. Another thing is, say I have problems with balance, right? Maybe the balance center in my brain is now being affected by the Alzheimer's disease or the dementia. So that what the symptoms that I'm seeing are a direct reflection of what's going on in my brain. But, this is the exciting thing, but, art and music aren't like that. So this is the exciting segue here, because art and music reside in many, I shouldn't say reside, but they resonate in many different parts of our brain. There's not one center for art or one center for music like some of the other things we do. And that is why research has been showing more and more and more that people who have a dementia can respond to art and music throughout most of the course of this long, long disease. So the example with music that you've probably heard is somebody who's having trouble asking for a glass of water. I can put on earbuds and play them that Beach Boys song that they first learned in their 30s when they had their first convertible car, and they'll start singing every single word because it's in a different place in their brain. So now I'm going to segue into these two quotes, which I'll just read the top one. Research in the field of memory loss is continuing to show that creative engagement not only enhances the quality of life for participants, but also aids in better overall health. Underline, aids in better overall health. So what this program here is doing is not just helping out with the time that they're actually here, but the big picture as well in their health. The next slide, and the last slide, is another benefit of art is that if somebody, a lot of the symptoms that people with dementia have are they're anxious, they're pacing, they're worried about something. So this can aid in reducing anxiety and agitation. It also can help reconnect families to their person, because they realize that person I love, they're still there. And the other thing is self-esteem. We all need a purpose in life. We all need meaning in life. And so there's the social connection, and there's also the sense that I'm doing something meaningful. So I just want to say that knowing all of this, the Alzheimer's Association has an art program called Memories in the Making, and it's still going on every Tuesday at our office, and it involves art for people who have dementia, and everything that we do is free. And then I got this call from Rosemary, and she said, how would you like to meet with me and talk about starting a program based on some of the nationwide models for programs that art museums are doing for people with Alzheimer's or other dementias? And I was so excited that, of course, I jumped at that, and we together created, but really the biggest thanks goes to Rosemary and Hannah for creating Reflections and Connections. And I'm just really proud to say that we're about to start the 5th session of this program. It's been very successful. There's a long wait list now for people who want to get in, but that doesn't say that please come and ask us if you want. We're ongoing. And I'm very proud to have been able to partner the Alzheimer's Association local office with the Art Museum. So now I get to turn it over to Rosemary for more information about the program. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Abby, and thank you so much for that introduction about Alzheimer's disease and other forms of dementia. That was really helpful to start this conversation. So one thing I want to do just before I launch into this slideshow is if everyone in the audience who knows someone who currently has an Alzheimer's or other dementia diagnosis, if you could just raise your hand up high. So it's about everybody in the audience knows someone. So currently there's 5.8 million Americans who have Alzheimer's disease. And we know that art is not going to cure Alzheimer's disease, but we know it's going to help. And we know it will help in the immediate, and it will have some lasting effects for not only the person with a dementia diagnosis, but for their care partners to participate in these kind of programs. I was very inspired by this article from the American Alliance of Museums. The article is titled Museums on Call, How Museums Are Addressing Health Issues. And this article came out in 2013. And it went on to describe how different museums have been partnering with local chapters of their Alzheimer's Association to offer memory loss tours for adults and facilitate hands-on art-making activities, as well as training how to trigger different prompts for memory, to bring up memories. So we are based on a program created by Sean Caulfield, who is the founder of this type of programming. And he used to work at an organization called Hearthstone Alzheimer's Foundation, which is currently titled I'm Still Here Foundation, based out of Boston. So he is really who we can credit for these incredible programs that have sprung up throughout the nation. His idea of Meet Me at the Museum was made popular by the Museum of Modern Art's educators. Their program called Meet Me at MoMA brought nationwide attention to this type of tour. And what they went on to do is host different training programs for museum educators from around the nation to come to the Museum of Modern Art, pick up these types of training techniques, and then bring them back to their own museums. And this was made possible through a major grant from the MetLife Foundation. And what's really special is they're no longer hosting those training sessions, but all of their resources are available online. So when Hannah and I first started this program, we went to the texts that they offer free of charge online, as well as their training videos, and we were able to really gain a sense of the purpose of these programs and how to properly facilitate them. Nationwide, there's really 2 models of these types of memory loss programs in museum settings. So the first one focuses solely on what's happening in the galleries and that social interaction. We have a 2-part program here where we start for an hour in our galleries, having a conversation normally on 2 to 3 pieces of artwork. And then we go down into the museum studios and we create artwork based off what we saw in the galleries. When I moved to the West Coast from New York, one person I knew I really wanted to connect with was a woman named Mary Jane Connect. And she is at the Frye Museum, and she is their Director of Creative Aging. So she has done so much in museum programs, especially on the West Coast, for people with memory loss. And her program is titled Here Now. It's an arts engagement program for adults living with dementia and their care partners to enjoy a creative and relaxing time together in a supportive setting. Their free program offers opportunities to enjoy conversation and works of art and new experiences in the Frye galleries and studio. So we both went up to Seattle and went to the Creative Aging Conference there, and were able to connect with Mary Jane in that way, as well as having her on the phone, really helping us coach through that first session of Reflections and Connections and getting it off the ground. We also went up to the Portland Art Museum to shadow their program Art Now. So The Portland Art Museum is the only other museum within the entire state of Oregon offering these specialized classes for individuals with memory loss. So we are really based off their model, which is 6 consecutive sessions of art making following the gallery conversation. What I think is special too is the Alzheimer's Association was the organization that started that collaboration with them. They reached out after hearing about these nationwide practices. And then when I came on to be a graduate student here and working with Hannah, we were able to approach the Alzheimer's Association to make this program happen. So it's really wonderful, I think, as a nonprofit organization that is this museum, to step up and really want to be part of this movement to help in the memory loss community. So we started our program here in August 2008 based off that 2-part model of having a conversation in the galleries based off different pieces of artwork. And Hannah and I go up into the galleries and we really look at artwork that we think will spark a lot of dialogue and conversations. And then we would follow it by a different art making activity. So I have a fine arts background, so this is something I really enjoy, is coming up with the different activities we do. So the program that first piloted in August 2018 has now, as Abby said, we're coming into our 5th session that will start next Thursday, September 12th. And so far we've had a total of 24 workshops in our first year, which I would consider all of them incredibly successful. Something that's really special about making artwork and doing these programs in museums is that we get to engage in object-based learning. So we are looking at the different artworks on the wall, and if any of you have been to the Jordan Schnitzer Museum of Art before, you know how often our collections switch out. And you might know about our Masterworks on Loan program, which allows us to see artists like Pablo Picasso and Jean-Michel Basquiat and Andy Warhol. Pretty regularly through the museum, we switch out those collections. When we get up into the galleries, once we've looked at me and Hannah have picked out which artworks we're going to look at, we use a strategy called visual thinking strategies, and this was created by a man named Philip Yenawine. And what VTS does is it asks 3 questions. So when we're looking at the painting, we ask, what is going on in this painting? What do you see that makes you say that? And what more can we find? And Hannah and I's job as facilitators is to listen carefully to each comment, to paraphrase those comments, to point out what we're looking at as the individual in the audience is describing what they see in the painting, and then also to link together those commentary. What's really special about visual thinking strategies, and it's just the way we start. So some museum educators will be very strict to visual thinking strategies. We have a mixed methodology, but visual thinking strategies allow you to look at artwork without any knowledge of art history, any knowledge of the artist, and still have a really vibrant and creative conversation just based on what you're looking at and what you can see there. There's no prior information needed to really enjoy a tour with VTS. We also come up with painting-specific dialogue prompts. So I'm going to bring us through the whole program based off this painting here by Eric Sandgren. The name of the painting is Island Visitor, and it was part of a collection called Visual Magic that we had up in the museum a few months ago. So we'll look at this painting and we'll ask, how do you think the boats got to the island? Where did the people go who were on the boats? Does the island look inviting? Would you want to visit yourself? What season does it look like? So we'll ask all of these different prompts, and what will end up coming out of these conversations is a time that someone really enjoyed taking a boat ride with their loved one, or a time that they went to the Pacific coast and there was a huge storm that they saw, and how it looks like the wind that they saw in the air that time they were at the ocean. So it really creates these very vibrant conversations that we're having in the galleries. After one tour, Pam and her mother, Audrey, were inspired by Eric Sandgren's painting, and we were working with watercolors this day. So Audrey, the mother, made her painting first, and her painting is here. And she was really inspired by those whimsical swirls in Eric Sandgren's work. And Audrey was just so inspired by her mother's interpretation of the painting. And then you can see that she brought in the boats that were familiar in Eric Sandgren's work too. But that's just one example of the object-based learning that happens in Reflections and Connections. Here you can see Hannah leading a tour of a piece called A Swan Comforting a Snake by Cicely Brown. And this painting was created by one of our care partners, Stephen. And he did this painting from memory. And he was really picking up on the very vague human body parts that you can see within Cicely Brown's work. Almost every tour we've done here, or every session of tours, we look at least one piece by Picasso, which is always a lot of fun. So here we were doing ceramic masks, where we were putting the different body parts in different areas, similar to how Picasso would create his different figures. This is my favorite object-based learning, just because it was so much fun to look at Yayoi Kusuma's giant metallic pumpkin and then come back into the studio and create our own little homages to Yayoi Kusuma's metallic pumpkins. There are a lot of outcomes of reflections and connections, so I've listed a few here, but the list goes on and on. But since starting this program, a creative aging program is now offered free of charge for workshop participants living with a dementia diagnosis and their care partners here in Eugene, Oregon. We also are creating an accessible space where all the participants feel welcome and a shared positive experience for the care team. So Abby does do screenings, and we make sure that both parties are interested and they want to be a part of this program, whether they have no experience creating art or if they've been to all of the top art museums in Europe. Individuals can really enjoy this program for where it meets them. Another thing that's really special about these workshops is that it provides a moment of rest and relaxation for care partners. So we have several individuals who come in with their adult mother who has an Alzheimer's diagnosis, and you can really see those adult children relax as the program goes on and on. They're no longer asking their mom if they're cold, do you need a glass of water, what can I get you, is everything okay? And they're just able to relax into the program. And it's a really beautiful space that we're able to provide. The museum also provides a very normalizing experience for the person with a dementia diagnosis. And I think that this is for a lot of reasons. But one is just that social interaction that's happening within our group, and everyone having a really positive attitude, I think really helps bring people into a very normalized experience. One of my absolute favorite parts of this program is the intergenerational connections that form too. So here you can see Ugo, who is one of our really brilliant student workers, in conversation with one of our past participants, Linda. And they had a really special connection. They just hit it off in a way that was really something to watch. And they really learned from each other as artists, which was special. So Linda has a technique where she loves creating watercolor paintings and then going back over them with like a fine point Sharpie marker. And Ugo, who is an art student here at the UO, had never seen that done before. So the painting here is created by Ugo in response or homage to one of Linda's paintings. So I think that ability to learn and grow from one another is something that makes this program also very special. We also, over the 6 sessions, really focus on exposure to different mediums. So with a fine arts background, that was something I thought was very important here. We could choose to just do paintings each week, but we don't do that. We try to start with paintings so that people initially feel comfortable. It's something that's familiar. And then we branch out and we start doing collage and printmaking and soft sculpture and ceramic work. And as people become more confident in the workshop, we really start to branch out with the different mediums we use. Another outcome is the positive socialization with other community members experiencing similar healthcare issues. So the Alzheimer's Association does list this as one of their early stage support programs. And what we do in our program is we never ever mention Alzheimer's disease, dementia, memory loss. We all know that we have this shared experience, but it's not something that we think about or talk about. We just enjoy being with one another there. And I think that's a very special thing. So we're not always focused on the disease. In the galleries too, there's also these opportunities to dialogue about emotions and memories and past experiences. So something that's really special is we'll have a couple who's been together for 40 years. And the husband will share a story and the wife will say, I've never heard him say that before. And it's a story about his childhood. So they get to know their loved one in a different way through this program sometimes. And I think that's a really another huge outcome that can be a very special thing, especially as someone is going through memory loss and might be starting to lose those memories, to then bring up these memories that the loved one can carry on with them forever. Another huge outcome is just that we are now one of 2 art museums within the entire state of Oregon who is offering these progressive access programs for a targeted healthcare population. I believe that nonprofits, especially as Alzheimer's disease becomes a greater and greater epidemic, will step up where they are fit. So art museums will offer more programs, theaters will offer matinees that are less sensory stimulating, and I believe that that is one way the arts can help with dementia, even though we cannot cure it. Another big outcome, we do a participant evaluation for the pair at the end of each session. So I'll just read through some of the feedback we've gotten. So we asked, what did you gain in the galleries? And we've heard, I don't know much about art, so I learned so much about how to interpret different pieces. The interactions built so much understanding and camaraderie. Interest, laughter, kindness, and hope. Interesting ideas help us interpret the artwork. Another individual said the viewing session illuminates the art making, which then adds to the seeing of the museum's art. We also asked, what did you gain from making art in the studio? One individual said, I found I could surpass my own expectations of limitations. I now paint when I wouldn't even try before. A pair said, we don't think of ourselves as artistic. Nevertheless, we were sometimes proud of our work. Another individual said, I like the freedom of making art and sitting around the table with the group. Some additional feedback I just wanted to point out. We had one participant say that they were amazed that this program is offered at no cost, especially for some persons who can sometimes be overlooked or undervalued. I enjoyed all of the opinions and work of others in the group. Finally, someone said, the people here are amazing and some of the nicest folks I've ever met. The experience continues to enhance my life. So really one of the biggest parts of Reflections and Connections has nothing to do with the art, has nothing to do with the masterworks on loan upstairs. It really has to do with the camaraderie and community that we build. Another just little thing I will say is I think it's really cool to come into a program and say that you have no artistic experience and that you've never painted before, and then have your paintings up on the wall of a museum that is showing Keith Haring's work and Joan Mitchell's work. What an amazing just sense of pride that must fill the participants with. So really we have this emphasis on community building. So when the exhibition that we'll look at after this opened up, we invited all 4 sessions of Reflections and Connections alumni back together to celebrate the inaugural year of the program. As Abby mentioned, they also offer memories in the making at their local Alzheimer's Association office, and many of our participants go on to participate in that program as well. Starting next month, we'll also be offering a monthly luncheon where we just get together to socialize and come back together as a group. So here is an image of the group after our alumni meeting for the inaugural year of Reflections and Connections, celebrating our exhibition that we'll view shortly. Before that, I would like to welcome any questions. And before we do go outside, we are going to hear from an amazing friend, artist, and just incredible person, Susan Bliven, who has been part of the workshops. But before that, I would like to welcome any questions the audience might have. Any? Yes?
Yes, well, it seems that there are multiple benefits to this program, and one of them is, as you described it, simply the social interaction, the sense that people are not alone, and so forth. But the question I want to ask is, how much of it, or is it even possible to determine, is based on an actual art activity? So, in other words, these people,
Oh, definitely. So we got a question about creative aging engagement and what is the value of getting together to play Scrabble or a different kind of socialization rather than just coming together to create artwork. And what I will say as someone who studies creative aging is any time that you are doing anything creative, and I would even argue that Scrabble is very creative, you're coming up with different words and really looking at language. Um,
Speaking as a participant, to me something like Scrabble would be frustrating because it makes it so that I have to have a certain outcome. I have these letters, I have to have a word. Whereas in the art, I can be free to make anything I want. And that lowers the stress for me.
So that was very beautifully said. So Susan was saying that where she was playing Scrabble, the outcome of having to have a certain word might become frustrating to her. Where with art, there is no outcome we're looking for. You're just able to relax into that creative process. What I will say is choir groups, especially for people with a memory loss diagnosis, are incredibly helpful, as well as people enjoy still creating theater and engaging with different musical instruments. So I think in all of the art forms, there really is a huge benefit to creating throughout the lifespan. But I do think that this is getting a little bit off the topic. I do think that no matter what form of creativity you're engaging with, it's amazing for the brain. And also, anytime you're able to socialize, and that outside of even art forms, just people who get together for a social club, I think really does a lot for individuals with that diagnosis. Abby?
Sorry, because you asked a really good question. And I know both Rosemary and I are kind of geeks about checking out the latest research. So the only thing I wanted to add, you answered that beautifully, is that we know that any type of social interaction is a wonderful thing for all of us as we age, and that it has some healing benefits, or I should say buffering benefits is what they're called, in the brain as far as lowering our risk factors for Alzheimer's and dementia. And the research that I've seen just talks about different things we can do, and then if you do more than one of them, you're kind of amplifying lowering the risk factors. So for example, social interaction is great on its own, but then social interaction that involves art is kind of like, X squared or something like that.
Thank you so much. Liz, do you have a question? Oh, I'm sorry, Barb.
I'm a caregiver of a person with Alzheimer's, and I react instantly to your suggestion because Scrabble is a verbal game, as are most games, or numeric, and verbal and numeric skills are among the skills that are going away. So that would lead to, and I work hard to make certain that my partner has a lot of social interaction, but playing cards or Scrabble or almost all board-based games don't work very well anymore because, as Linda said, or as Susan said, it leads to frustration. Can't do that. But the art, somehow, because it's involves so many parts of the brain, art and music, you can still do. And that's wonderful to have some places where there is no frustration.
Thank you so much, Barb. Are there any other questions? Okay, so I am going to turn it over to Susan Bliven.
Okay, can you hear me with this? I've got a mic here, so I couldn't tell. You've heard from the professionals what it's like, or what they're trying to do with the art programs. As a participant, I want you to know what it's like for me. I've written some things down, frankly, I won't remember to say them otherwise, but I want you to know what it's like. Reflections and Connections program, my first thought was, of course, this program has done so much for me that I'd like to share my experiences and give something back to the program that has helped me so much. My second thought was 10 to 15 minutes. I'm not that interesting. I'm still not, so you're getting much less time. I've been fortunate to be part of the Reflections and Connections program since its first session. I've also participated in the second session and the last 2 weeks of the third. So I believe I have a good understanding of its impact on participants. I've enjoyed my experiences so much that I've asked Rose and Hannah to call me whenever they have an opening, even if it's only for 1 week. All I ask is an hour's notice to come, half an hour in a pinch. That's how important my experiences with Reflections and Connections are to me. I was initially reluctant to participate in Reflections and Connections. While I liked art, I had no experience in any artistic endeavor, although my stick figures are world class. I've never had an art class in my life. I may have colored or painted with my children when they were growing up, but I have no memory of doing so. I had no interest in learning about art, and less interest in joining a group. While I didn't realize it, I was depressed and unwilling to leave my cocoon. These feelings are common in people who experience dementia. We tend to feel more comfortable with the familiar, leading to social isolation. I didn't even realize what I was experiencing. My husband Lee told me that Abby, the Alzheimer Association coordinator in Eugene, had suggested I join the Reflections and Connections group. I really didn't want to participate. I felt uncomfortable participating in a group of strangers. But I like Abby, and I felt that as she recommended it, there might be something positive in it for me. When it was explained that this was a new program and that it was a collaboration between the Schnitzer Art Museum and the Alzheimer Association, I agreed to try it. I hope to help pilot a program that could benefit people who experience the many problems of dementia, because as a former therapist and current dementia patient, I knew that studies have established that art can benefit people who have dementia. I was apprehensive before the first session. What was I doing in an art group? What if everyone could see that I didn't belong here? Would I feel inferior because I was out of place? I felt even worse after I met the rest of the participants. It seemed like I was the only participant who wasn't an artist or who hadn't toured famous, prestigious European museums. I'd never even been to Europe or set foot in a famous museum. I definitely did not belong here. Worse, I discovered that we are expected to discuss the various pieces of art that we viewed. What was I expected to say? The sky needed more blue? Worse yet, we were expected to create our own artwork that was influenced by the art we had just discussed. Stick figures, anyone? Lee, what did you get me into? You owe me major. I decided I could fake it until someone found me out. Stress, anyone? It surprised me that other participants looked as apprehensive as I felt. Come on, next to me you're all experts. Discussions of the paintings we viewed were initially tentative for almost everyone. It was a huge risk to put our views out there and possibly be disagreed with. Fortunately, my fears didn't occur. Everyone listened attentively, and even the listener disagreed with the speaker. Her responses were given in a positive, respectful manner that added to the initial observation. It didn't take long for most of us to relax and learn to express our views and add to other people's observations. We held real conversations. Believe me, that's rare. Slowly at first, and less tentatively as time went on. I learned to appreciate art that I would normally have avoided through the thoughtful comments of others. Although I will always prefer representational art, abstract art is no longer something that I dismiss sight unseen. I've even painted a few abstracts, all unsuccessful, but I've tried to expand my painting horizons. Reflections and Connections continues to benefit me in many ways. Because of it, I found an activity that I enjoy and which enriches my life. I now participate in the Alzheimer Association's Memory Making program, where I've met other participants who want to express themselves artistically and to interact with other people in a supportive environment. Some of the reflections and connections participants also go there, so I believe that I'm not the only person to have found value in my experiences here. Thank you, Abby, Helen, and Michelle, for making this ongoing opportunity happen. There are so many of us who participate, and we are so well supported. It's wonderful. Because of my experiences, my mood is lighter. The depression that I have acknowledged is gone most of the time. I'm less confused and have fewer difficulties with words. My focus and concentration has improved. I've become more engaged in my community, even volunteering with Please Help. I'm not as isolated and anxious. I'm me again, which is good because I like the old me. I've missed me. So have my family and friends, many of whom have commented on the new old me coming back. Oddly, as my abilities progressed, I found it easier to accept my disabilities. I rediscovered a part of me that I had lost or had never developed. I've changed a great deal due to my experiences with the people and activities of the Reflections and Connections program. However, I don't believe I'm the only person to benefit from this program. People who experience dementia are usually socially isolated and have few stimulating activities available. I was isolated and didn't even realize it. Coupled with declining abilities and negative symptoms such as confusion, memory loss, physical decline, lack of social opportunities, mood dysfunction, and so much more, we can regress faster than might be expected by the dementia processes alone. And I believe that isolation accounts for much of our questions. Art brought us out of our isolation over time. I have observed fellow participants and have noticed positive changes in almost everyone involved. I used to be a therapist and I like to observe people. Some people who seemed withdrawn began to discuss the art we saw. They appeared to relax some and to interact more, even if it was only with their caregivers. Most people seemed absorbed in their art projects. I saw the same changes with caregivers. Many seemed able to resume some family roles and interactions, not just the caregiving roles. I hope these changes lasted beyond session's end. The changes that I observed in participants were only possible through the supportive, caring, nurturing environment that Anna, Rose, and their assistant Bruno provided. Thank you all for enriching my life. And incidentally, I paid almost every day now, even though I've never picked up a paintbrush before. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Susan. That was so beautifully said and touching.
Thank you all for listening.
All right, so we're going to transition into the hallway now. Hannah will be leading a tour of the exhibition. We're going to start down at that end, so we'll meet you all out there.
So we're going to start down here at this end of the hallway with two pieces of artwork by Audrey and Pam. And these were actually both discussed in the slideshow, you probably remember. They were inspired by Eric Sandgren's Island Visitor. So for these, Audrey, the participant, actually created her painting first, and then her daughter was inspired by her mom's artwork, creating the second one there. So I love to look at these both to see the use of colors and lines and the way that they interpreted that painting, kind of taking the essence of it and the colors and transforming that into something kind of from an aerial bird's eye view. And we'll move on to the next pairing. So next we have a collection of two pieces of artwork from two participants. So the first one here is by Fred Benning, and the next one is by Forrest Bell. So these are two participants, and they were both inspired in this art by George Green's Instantaneously Everything. So this was a piece of artwork that was also shared in the slideshow. It was a giant piece of artwork, and in that artwork, we were really looking at the way that the artwork looked like waves or musical notes, and how color was used to emphasize feeling in the artwork. So you can see that even though we had the same prompt and the same artwork inspiring these two pieces, both participants interpreted it very differently. Now we'll move on to the next two. So these two are by Susan Bliven, Susan who was just speaking to us. Susan created a series of two season artworks. So she first did all of the seasons, winter, spring, summer, and fall, and then she did a second series of the seasons. So this is actually part of her second series of the seasons, and here she's going into winter 2 and spring 2. So I actually would like to read what she wrote here. Here Susan wrote, "Reflections and Connections has changed my life. I could never imagine being at the place I am now. I can focus better and spend hours painting. My mood is also lighter. I feel accomplished, and you can never overestimate that power." She goes on to say, "The program has helped me develop into who I was before. I am much more the person I used to be. It is nice seeing me again." All right, so we'll move on to the next two. So the next two pieces were inspired by a Joan Mitchell piece. And Joan Mitchell is an abstract expressionist. And Rose and I, have really enjoyed creating abstract art with participants. So this was a fun, kind of a fun prompt. This first one is by Linda, who is a participant. The second one is by Lee, who is a care partner. He's actually the husband of Susan, so he's here today. And in this, something that Rose and I want to emphasize was that we had a lot of fun as a group choosing the names for the paintings. It was always kind of fun. Sometimes someone would have a name right away that they would want to call their painting, and other times it was a fun kind of group activity of looking at the painting together and deciding what we would call it. So this first one by Linda, she named herself "The Waves Are Harder." And the second one by Lee, "The 4th of July," I believe that was a group decision for that one. Yes, it was. All right, so we'll move on to the next two. And these are two by Linda. So this first piece of artwork here was also shown in the slideshow presentation. And this is the piece of artwork that inspired Ugo's artwork. So Ugo is one of our undergraduate art students here who works with us in the program. So he was inspired by her technique here. And what I would have to say about Linda is that she's a participant who came in knowing that she was an artist. She came in without any kind of stigma there. She was definitely confident in what she was doing. And she also was always adding really engaging comments in the galleries that really made us think about things in a different way than we would have without her input. And finally, our last two paintings down here on the end, they are both created by care partners, one by Pam and one by Skip. So the first one by Pam was inspired by that one was by Joan Mitchell, and the one by Skip was inspired by George Green, so the instantaneously everything. And Skip was a really fun participant. He did not view himself as an artist at all. He said that before he came here, he would only just doodle in church. And when we started seeing his artwork, it was so incredible. I asked him a couple times, "Are you sure you haven't done art before, created art?" And he said he never had. So it was fun to see how, as a care partner, he could come in and the door was open for him to really explore his artistic side. So that was a very quick kind of whirlwind tour of our gallery here. Thank you so much for coming. If you have any questions, you are more than welcome to stop to ask me, to ask Rose, to ask Abby any questions. If you are interested in getting involved with the program, please feel welcome to ask us any questions about that as well. And enjoy the artwork.